The alarm woke Danny at 3 in the morning. He rolled out of his bunk and hit the cold metal floor of the fuel depot with bare feet. The station was called Cinder 7, and it sat on a rock in the asteroid belt like a forgotten coin at the bottom of a well. Nothing happened here. Ships came in, took fuel, and left. Danny fixed what needed fixing and tried not to think about how far he was from Earth. He was 23 years old and 6 months out of technical school. His grandmother had wanted him to take over her auto shop back in Texas, but the shop had closed 2 years before she died, and there was nothing left for him there. So he signed a contract with the Frontier Service and ended up here, at the edge of human space, where the pay was good and the days were long and empty. The alarm meant a ship was coming in on emergency approach. Danny pulled on his coveralls and boots and made his way to the control room. The night shift supervisor, a woman named, was already there, staring at her screen with a strange look on her face. "Cruiser," she said. "Solo pilot, engine failure." Danny had never seen it in person. He knew what everyone knew. They were big. They were old. Their empire had once covered half the galaxy, but that was centuries ago, before some disaster that nobody talked about. Now they kept to themselves, and humans traded with them carefully, the way you might trade with a wounded lion. "I will handle the docking," said. "You handle the repairs." "Me," Danny said. "I have never even seen tech." "You are the only mechanic on shift. I am not certified." She did not look at him. "Good luck." The ship came in 20 minutes later. Danny watched it through the viewport as it limped toward the docking bay. It did not look like a ship. It looked like something that had grown rather than been built. The hull was dark and scaled, like the skin of some enormous creature. Fins and ridges ran along its length. As it passed under the station lights, Danny could see that parts of it were glowing a sickly orange, and thin trails of vapor were leaking from cracks in its side. The airlock cycled, and Danny stepped into the docking bay. The ship sat there, clicking and groaning as its hull cooled. A hatch opened in its side, not sliding or folding but peeling back like an eyelid, and the pilot stepped out. She was 8 feet tall. Her scales were the color of old iron, and her eyes burned like coals in the low light. Wings folded against her back, and a tail swept behind her. She wore armor that seemed to be part of her, grown into her body rather than strapped on. When she moved like a predator, each step deliberate and dangerous. Danny stood very still. His mouth was dry. He tried to remember the protocols for dealing with: be respectful, do not stare, do not show fear. The dragon woman looked down at him. Her nostrils flared. Then she spoke, and her voice was like rocks grinding together. 16 months without intimacy," she muttered, "and now I must deal with a child." Danny felt his face go red. He was not sure what she meant, but the way she said it made his stomach flip. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. They did not seem to notice his reaction. She turned back to her ship and made a sound of disgust. The hull was now visibly damaged. Cracks ran through the scales, and something inside was making a low, unhappy noise. "The plasma coils have fused," she said. "The backup systems are expressing displeasure." As if to prove her point, a deep growl came from inside the ship. It did not sound mechanical. It sounded alive. "You are the mechanic?" she asked. "Yes," Danny managed. "Danny, I will take a look." "You are small," she said. It was not an insult, it was a statement of fact. "And young." "I am the only one here," Danny said. "So I guess I am what you got." She studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were ancient and tired, and something else that Danny could not name. Then she stepped aside and gestured toward the open hatch. "I am Commander," she said. "Do not touch anything unless you know what it does." Danny climbed into the ship. The interior was warm and humid like the inside of a mouth. The walls were not walls but membranes, veined and pulsing faintly. Cables ran through them like arteries. Everything was organic, grown rather than built, and everything was alive. He found the engine compartment, or what he assumed was the engine compartment. It was a chamber filled with coiled tubes and glowing nodes, all of it slick and wet and moving slightly. At the center was something that looked like a heart, and it was beating weakly. The ship groaned again. Danny could feel it in his bones. "This is bad," he said to himself. "This is very bad." Appeared behind him, ducking through the narrow passage. In the confined space, she seemed even larger, her presence overwhelming. She looked at the damaged engine and made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Can you fix it?" she asked. Danny looked at the alien technology. He had no idea how any of it worked. He had no tools for this. He had no training for this. Every sensible part of his brain was telling him to admit that he was out of his depth and call for help. But help was weeks away, and the ship was dying, and the dragon woman was looking at him with those ancient, tired eyes, and Danny thought about his grandmother, who had once fixed a transmission with baling wire and a prayer. "I can try," he said. Blinked. It was the first time her expression had changed since she arrived. "You will try," she repeated, "even though you do not know how." "That is usually how I learn things," Danny said, "by trying." The dragon woman stared at him. Then she made a sound that Danny thought might be a laugh, though it was hard to tell. "Humans," she said, "you are either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Danny admitted. "Now let me work." He turned back to the engine and took a deep breath. The ship groaned around him, sad and sick and waiting. Danny reached for his diagnostic tablet and got to work. He did not know if he could fix it. He did not even know where to start. But he was going to try because that was what humans did. They tried, and sometimes, against all odds, they succeeded. The dragon woman watched him from the shadows, her ancient eyes unreadable. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, something began to stir. Danny spent the first hour just trying to understand what he was looking at. The ship's engine was not an engine in any sense he knew. It was an organ, a living thing that processed energy the way a stomach processes food. The plasma coils were more like nerves, and the fused sections were like damaged tissue and dead. He asked questions. She answered them, but her answers did not help much. Ships were grown from eggs, she explained. They bonded with their pilots and responded to emotional commands. Traditional repairs required months of careful work by trained beast speakers who could communicate with the ship's mind. "Beast speakers?" Danny asked. "Those who can feel what the ship feels," said. "Who can soothe its spirit and guide its healing." "And you do not have one of those on board." "I am alone," she said. The words carried weight. "I have been alone for 16 months. Danny looked at the ship around him. 16 months with only a dying vessel for company. No wonder she had muttered about intimacy. He was beginning to understand, intimacy meant connection, conversation, being known. He looked at his diagnostic tablet. It was a simple device, designed for human machinery. He had no reason to think it would work on alien technology, but he had to try something. He found what looked like a nerve cluster near the damaged coils. It was pulsing weakly, surrounded by some kind of membrane. Danny pulled out a roll of tape and some wire and started rigging a connection. "What are you doing?" asked. "I am going to ask it what is wrong," Danny said. She made a noise that sounded like disbelief. "You cannot simply ask. The ship does not speak human languages. It speaks in feelings, in dreams, in..." Danny pressed a button on his tablet. The screen flickered. Then words began to appear, scrolling fast, faster than he could read. The ship was talking. It was not language exactly. It was more like emotion translated into data. But Danny's tablet was doing its best to interpret, and what it showed him was a flood of feeling. Loneliness, pain, fear, abandonment. The ship had been suffering for 16 months, absorbing isolation and adding its own, and now it was pouring out everything it had held inside. Danny sat down on the warm, wet floor and started reading. When the ship complained about being ignored, he nodded. When it expressed fear about dying, he said, "Yeah, That sounds really hard. When it listed all the small damages it had accumulated, all the hurts that no one had noticed, Danny listened. Watched in silence. Her expression was impossible to read, but her tail had gone very still. After an hour, the flood of words began to slow. The ship seemed calmer. Danny could feel it in the way the walls had stopped trembling, the way the heartbeat at the center of the engine had grown steadier. "Okay," Danny said. "I think I understand. You are hurt and scared and you have been alone too long, I get it. But I need you to work with me here. Can you show me where it hurts the most?" A section of the wall began to glow faintly. Danny followed it to a junction where several nerve clusters met. The tissue there was blackened and dead. "This is the main problem," he said. "The damage here is blocking everything else." He looked at what he had to work with. His toolkit was designed for human machines. He had copper wire, silicone sealant, electrical tape, and a battery he had taken from a forklift. None of it should work on living technology. But he had an idea. "Listen," he said to the ship, speaking out loud even though he felt foolish. "I have some stuff that might help. It is not like what you are made of. It is human stuff, but I think if we work together we can make it fit. Will you let me try?" The ship did not answer in words, but Danny felt something change in the air around him, a kind of openness, a willingness. "That will not work," said. Her voice was strange, uncertain. "The ship will reject foreign materials. It is not designed to accept." "I told it the stuff was a gift," Danny said, "from a friend." He started working. He cleaned out the dead tissue with gentle hands, talking to the ship the whole time, explaining what he was doing and why. He used the copper wire to bridge the damaged nerves, wrapping each connection carefully and sealing it with silicone. The battery he rigged as a temporary power source, feeding energy into the weakened systems. It should not have worked. Copper and silicone and human electricity had no business inside an alien organism. But the ship accepted each piece, drawing them in, wrapping them in new tissue, making them part of itself. Danny worked for hours. His back ached and his hands were slick with some kind of fluid that he tried not to think about. Stayed with him, handing him tools when he asked, watching everything he did with those burning eyes. Finally, he made the last connection. He held his breath and waited. The ship shuddered. The heartbeat at its center, which had been weak and irregular, began to strengthen. The glow in the walls grew brighter. And then, from somewhere deep inside the vessel, came a sound that Danny had not expected. The ship was purring. It was a low, rumbling vibration that filled the chamber and made Danny's teeth buzz. It sounded happy. It sounded grateful. Stared, her mouth was open, showing rows of sharp teeth, but her expression was one of pure shock. "That is not possible," she said. "You cannot. This ship has destroyed enemy fleets. It does not purr." "I think it just needed someone to listen," Danny said. He was too tired to be proud of himself. And someone to tell it that things were going to be okay. Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know it would accept you?" "I did not," Danny admitted. "But my grandmother always said that anything can be saved if you care enough to try. She fixed cars until she was 80 years old. She taught me that machines have feelings too, even if they cannot say so. You just have to pay attention." Looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a child or a human or a mechanic, but as something else. Something unexpected. "Your people," she said slowly. "You do not see the universe as something to be conquered." "No," Danny said. "We see it as something to be understood and fixed when it breaks." The ship purred louder. In the warm, humid air, surrounded by alien technology that had somehow become familiar, Danny felt something shift. The dragon woman was still looking at him with those ancient eyes, but now there was something new in them. Curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of respect. "The repairs will need time to set," Danny said. "The ship needs to rest. 24 hours at least. Then I will stay, said, if that is permitted. Of course, Danny said. Are you hungry? I was about to have dinner. It is nothing fancy, but you are welcome to join me. The dragon woman tilted her head. For a moment she looked almost uncertain, like a warrior who had been offered a truce and did not know how to accept it. I have never eaten human food, she said. Then tonight is a night for new experiences, Danny said. Come on. He led the way out of the ship, and after a moment the dragon woman followed. Danny's quarters were small. A bunk, a desk, a tiny kitchen unit, and a window that looked out at the stars. Had to duck to get through the door, and once inside she seemed to fill the entire space. Her wings brushed the walls. Her tail curled around her feet. Sorry about the size, Danny said. They do not build these stations for guests your height. I have spent 16 months in a ship that knows my every thought, said. This feels almost spacious. Danny heated up a burrito in the microwave and pulled 2 beers from the small refrigerator. He offered one too, who examined the bottle with obvious suspicion before taking it. What is this? She asked. Beer. It is a drink made from grain. We ferment it and add bubbles. It makes things feel a little easier. She sniffed it, then took a careful sip. Her expression was hard to read. It is strange, she said, but not unpleasant. Danny cut the burrito in half and offered her a piece. She held it delicately in her clawed fingers, studying it like a puzzle. This is your food. This is cheap station food, Danny said. Real human food is better, but this is what I have. Took a bite, she chewed slowly, her expression thoughtful. Then she took another bite. It is warm, she said, and there are many flavors together. We do not cook like this. How do you eat? Raw meat mostly, sometimes prepared with ceremonial significance, but always simple. Single flavors. We believe complexity in food is a sign of weakness, that a warrior should not need their senses pleased. That sounds boring, Danny said. Made that grinding sound that he was beginning to recognize as laughter. It is, but we have many traditions that do not serve us anymore. We cling to them because we have forgotten why we started. They ate in silence for a while. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. Danny found himself relaxing, despite the fact that he was sharing dinner with a creature who could tear him apart with one hand. You said you have been alone for 16 months, he said. That is a long time. His eyes dimmed slightly. She set down her beer and looked out at the stars. It was a punishment, she said. I challenged the high matriarch of my clan. I told her that our ways were leading us to extinction, that we needed to change or die. She did not appreciate my honesty. So she sent you to Deep Space Patrol. Alone, with a ship that was already old and tired, to patrol routes that no one travels anymore. It is not death, but it is close. What happened to your people? Danny asked. I know there was some kind of disaster, but no one talks about it. Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy. We conquered too much. We grew too proud. We believed that strength was the only virtue, that dominance was the only purpose. And then we met a species that we could not conquer. They did not fight us. They simply refused to submit. No matter what we did, they would not bend. And we did not know what to do with something we could not dominate. What happened to them? They are still there, on their world, unchanged. We have been withdrawing ever since. Our empire is a ghost of what it was. Our numbers decline. Our ships grow old and we forget how to make new ones. We are a people waiting to die, too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to change. Danny thought about that. He thought about his grandmother's auto shop and the town that had dried up around it, and all the people who had refused to adapt until it was too late. I am sorry, he said. That sounds hard. Looked at him. Her eyes were very old and very tired, but something in them had changed. You are the first person in years who has said that to me, she said. My own people would consider it weakness to acknowledge pain. To you, it is simply kindness. Kindness is not weakness, Danny said. It takes strength to care about someone else. That is not what we were taught. Maybe that is what went wrong. The night went on. They talked about everything and nothing. Danny told her about Earth, about growing up poor in a border town, about his grandmother who had taught him that anything could be saved if you tried hard enough. Told him about her training, her battles, the glory days of her people, and the long, slow decline that had followed. Somewhere in the middle of the night, Danny realized that he was not afraid of her anymore. She was not a monster or a conqueror. She was just someone who had been alone too long and had forgotten what it felt like to be heard. The station lights dimmed to simulate dawn. They had been talking for hours. His beer was empty, and Danny had lost count of how many he had drunk. The burrito wrappers lay crumpled on the table between them. "I should check on the ship," said, but she did not move. "It can wait a few more minutes," Danny said. She nodded. Her tail had uncurled during the night and now lay relaxed across the floor. Her wings were folded loosely. She looked almost peaceful. "Among my people," she said slowly, "there is a concept of intimacy that is different from what you might think. It is not about bodies. It is about minds. The meeting of two spirits, the vulnerability of honest speech. It is rarer than conquest and more valuable than territory. I have not experienced it in years, perhaps decades." Danny understood now what she had meant when she first arrived. 16 months without intimacy, without anyone to talk to, anyone to know her, anyone to care. "Do humans have a word for this?" she asked. "A bond forged in a single night that feels older than time." Danny thought about it. He thought about his grandmother and her friends, the old women who had gathered at her kitchen table for 50 years to share stories and complaints and laughter. He thought about the bonds that formed between soldiers in war, between survivors of disaster, between strangers who found each other in the dark. "Yeah," he said, "we call it friendship. Sometimes it is the start of something more. Sometimes it is enough on its own. Considered this." Then she extended her hand, clawed and scaled and massive. Danny took it. Her grip was warm and surprisingly gentle. "Then we are friends," she said. "Danny, mechanic, human friend." "We are friends," Danny agreed. "Commander, friend." The ship was ready by evening. Danny walked with to the docking bay, where the cruiser sat humming contentedly, its hull already starting to heal. The cracks were closing, new scales growing over the damaged tissue. The ship recognized Danny when he approached, and a ripple of warmth passed through its surface. "It likes you," said. "I like it too," Danny said. "Take care of each other." Climbed into her ship. Before the hatch closed, she turned back. "When my patrol ends," she said, "I will return. I do not know what will happen then. Perhaps I will face the matriarch again. Perhaps I will be exiled, but whatever comes, I will come back here first." "Why?" Danny asked, though he already knew. "Because you listened," she said. "Because you tried. Because you showed me that there is another way to be strong, and because I want to learn more." The hatch closed. The ship lifted off the deck, its engines humming smoothly. Danny watched through the viewport as it cleared the station and turned toward open space. Before it jumped to faster than light, a message came through on his personal channel. Just 2 words. "Thank you." Then the ship was gone, and Danny was alone again, but not in the same way as before. He had made a friend in the depths of space. He had fixed something that should have been impossible to fix. And somewhere out there, a dragon woman was flying toward whatever came next, carrying a piece of human kindness with her. Danny went back to work. There were other ships to service, other problems to solve, but he kept the communication channel open just in case. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars burned cold outside his window, he thought about what his grandmother had taught him. That anything could be saved if you cared enough. That strength was not about dominance but about connection. That the universe was not something to be conquered but something to be understood and fixed and loved. Humanity would go far, he thought, not because they were strong, though they could be, not because they were clever, though they were that too, but because they knew how to listen. They knew how to care. They knew how to reach across the vast dark spaces between stars and say, I see you, I hear you, you are not alone. That was the human gift, and maybe, just maybe, it was enough to save a galaxy. The end.